Hey everyone! Welcome to the Drawing Jam for Storyboards. In this interactive session, you'll learn the foundations of strong storyboard drawing, how to communicate ideas clearly, work efficiently, and level up your visual storytelling skills. So grab your sketchbooks or tablet and get ready to draw along. Please welcome the incredible Mike Daley, story artist extraordinaire at Pixar Animation Studios, whose credits include The Incredibles 2, Luca, Turning Red, and more.
All right, and more. Thank you, guys. We're going to do a little draw along together. If you guys are into that. Do you guys like to draw? Hope so. Yeah. There was some thoughts of a Cintiq, but I think I'm happy with paper. You guys are happy with paper. If you guys want to draw along, there are more materials here if you don't have anything. There's some Post-its here and some crayons. So go ahead and grab some, even if you just don't have anything and you don't feel like you can draw, but you can kind of join and go along with this. All right? All right, so just like a real quick about me, I went to Cal State Fullerton. I know. Oh, hey, yeah, Fullerton. All right, cool, yeah. It was a great school. It was awesome. I loved it. And I got an internship at Cartoon Network in the recording studio. Then I was on Powerpuff Girls, and eventually started working on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. I worked in a lot of children's educational games. Oh, look at that. Let's see. Someone doesn't update enough. And like Leapster, but I really liked the story process. I really enjoyed it. And even as an art director, I felt like I wanted to get my whole team and just lock them in a room and figure out the entire process on dry erase board before we kind of got into anything. And I was working there with my friend Mike Matese, who works on the Forest books. He might be here. And he was just like, you should just be a story artist, try to be a story artist. So I broke away from that. I made everyone sleep with all keeping them there, but ended up working at Cinematico. I worked at Blue Sky for a long time. Thank you. On Ice Age 4, Rio 2, a bunch of different movies. Then I worked at Paramount for a little while. Now I'm up at Pixar. I've worked on a bunch of different things, so I've kind of been there for a bit. And I've also run the internship a couple times. So yeah, I've been working in the industry now for a bit. And I'm working on the next Incredibles at the moment. I also made this storyboard character, Story Troll. So this is on Instagram. It kind of just gives a lot of tips, and a lot of these tips come from people that I knew that were helping me. And I thought, well, I should kind of some of them were kind of gruff and surly people that were had a lot of different ideas on how you can quickly move through storyboards, and that was always very, very helpful for me. So I wanted to pass it along, so I kind of took a lot of that and. We have a tablet for you. Do you really? Oh no, I think I'm okay. I'm gonna go on paper.
You sure?
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Paper's fun. I don't know. Cintiqs are fun. Paper's fun. But so I just wanted to kind of pass this stuff on. But a lot of this stuff comes from tips and tricks that I don't necessarily see too much in the industry pertaining to storyboards, and a lot of it is just a poor intern who has to do 100 drawings in an hour, and it's here's how you kind of get that done in a way that can kind of function what's important, what drops off, right? That type of idea. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do a drawing jam. We're gonna draw from film. We're gonna show film studies, and we're kind of gonna start studying how that works. So before that, I'm gonna go into, this is kind of my mantra of what I kind of tell the interns. It's eyes, silhouettes, specificity. These three things kind of line up how to draw for storyboarding. Helps out a lot, and I think it keeps you on the right track if you start worrying about these things, right? Eyes, they're so important. I mean, you can have dot eyes, but a lot of stuff you'll see don't have dot eyes. They have full eyes, and almost always the focus of any of these feature animated films go to the eyes. And so a lot of times I feel if you really focus on the eyes, you can get a lot done. I love showing this because this was in in the 1970s, or maybe in the, I think it was 1960s, but there was a Viking satellite that took pictures of Mars. And it found this picture. And then for many seasons of Unsolved Mysteries, this was on my TV. It would be like, the face of Mars, the face on Mars. And it was like kind of like the aliens guys saying like, oh, these match up with like the pyramids and there's like a face on there and stuff like that. But really, it's just this thing called pareidolia, where we are looking for faces in almost everything that we do. And so humans recognize faces. Like they took a better picture of it, like much later with satellites. This is what it is. But the shadow looks like a face, right? And there were some scientists that did a test that were like, if we were elephants, here are all the elephant shadows on Mars that you would think like there's an elephant head, you know? But because we're people, we're looking for specific faces. And a lot of that just revolves around the eyes. Eyes are expressive. You get a lot of like emotion and push through the eyes. You could almost clean up like all of your boards in a way that you could like leave a lot of value, like a lot of detail can fall off if you get those eyes right. If you put a little bit more detail, maybe a little bit more like value in the eyes, a lot of other things can start falling off, right? Dot eyes are great. You can draw invisible eyes, but I'm going to try to skip through this so we can start drawing. Okay, so eyes, and then silhouettes. Just the gesture, but getting the overall outline of what you're trying to draw, very important, right? In fact, a lot of times you'll see that a lot of characters are designed with very specific different silhouettes, right? Turning red. If you look at May and all of her friends, they all have like, one has a triangle hairdo, one is like a square, Abby is like a circle, you know, May is like a trapezoid. So you have different shapes and different things, different silhouettes of these characters, just so you can like quickly recognize who they are and read that quickly. In fact, there's a lot of story artists that work very rough, and they're literally just draw like, okay, got it, circle and square, right? Think like Monsters, Inc., right? Sully is a square, Mike is a circle. I've seen a lot of boards from movies where people are moving really fast, and like, what are you going to do to get something done quickly? You're just going to draw like a circle and a square, right? Okay? And then the last thing is specificity. This is kind of like a more broad thing, but it more like lines up with, you know, you draw like a bunch of like popsicle heads or stick figure characters in your boards, that's fine. But if you can add just a little bit of specificity to some of the things that allow it to become, you know, is this a hand or is it like an old hand? Or is it like a cut up hand or like a woman's hand with nice nails and a bracelet, you know, things like that. Those are things that kind of like can push your boards towards a more specific idea. So for instance, like if you're drawing like an alleyway or something, maybe you think of like just drawing like a little bit of a brick, you know, kind of pattern on the wall. It doesn't have to be like perfect, all the bricks drawn or anything, but you just want to tell that it's like, this is a brick wall, you know what I mean? So if someone hits a brick wall, that's what's going to happen. Or it's just so if someone hits the side of a log cabin, this is like wood, and that's what that kind of looks like. So a lot of that kind of like specificity can come into play. Let me see. But let's start drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw up here, and then I'm going to have you guys, hey.
The one, it's a plug and play so that they could see
really?
what you're drawing.
Okay, well, I was gonna, yeah, I'll just try this and I'll put it on the camera, I think that's what I'll do. I think so, yeah, I'll try it, yeah. So let's try this, okay? All right, so let's kind of like get our workout. So this is kind of like a reverse version. We're gonna draw the storyboard version of these like finished film scenes. And a lot of, I'll show you some stuff as we go, but the other thing that, besides maybe eye silhouettes, specificity, the drawing stuff, a lot of stuff that we tell the interns to do is do film studies. Look at films, find the films that you really like, the films that work for you. Why do they work for you? You know, you want to kind of like decipher that and start working on that and try to figure that out and decipher it. And the best way to do that is to kind of take them, to study them, to draw them, right? So yeah, let's start with this. All right, so this is, what's this from? Okay, cool. Yeah, let's draw it. Let's draw this. Draw the storyboard version of this drawing. Okay? So, doesn't have to be crazy good. Doesn't have to be crazy. But remember, what are we looking at? We're kind of looking at eyes, silhouettes, and specificity. Okay? All right. So I'll draw a little bit too. I'll give you like maybe a minute or so. These are studies you can do at home on your couch if you're watching movies. You can like pause, or you can like look at frames online, or like what I like to do is I like to collect like little clips of videos from films, and I'll like kind of like compile them and then put them all together into like some files that I can kind of get to later, and I can kind of just look at and I can draw from. Let's see, gosh, what was I drawing from recently? I was looking at some old Venture Brothers things recently, some like old comics and things like that. But like it's kind of like it's dealer's choice. There's no like real like right or wrong way to do that. There's some films that are maybe have like a pretty good composition and are better than others, but like it's really dealer's choice, and this is kind of like where you just want to build up that library. The nice thing about this too is a lot of times when you're storyboarding, you end up making kind of like decisions that you're like, oh, are these like subconscious or are these conscious? But a lot of times you can kind of like choose a movie and be like, oh, this is exactly, we're going to shoot this exactly like they shot this in 2010 or something like that. Like these, you can kind of pull up these movies as reference. All right. Usually when I do stuff like this, it's like when I'm doing warm-ups. Like if I'm trying to get warm for the day, or if I'm trying to kind of like put something in my mind. Let's say I'm going to board something that has like a lot of specific compositions in it. Let's say I'm working on something that's going to look like Wes Anderson or something, right? Peanuts pulled heavily from Wes Anderson, very kind of flat. You could look at Wes Anderson stuff and kind of like get that idea in your head, like the different proportions and things like that. All right. Okay, how do we do? Let's see if I can get this camera here to work. Camera option. How do I turn the camera on myself? Does anyone know? Photo booth? All right. Photo booth. I don't even have photo booth, I think. Let's see. Well, here, I'll put this up as you guys want to keep drawing. Okay. Let's see. Should just be a simple way to do the camera, right? Would Zoom do it? Will it just show the camera? Let's see. Oh yeah, FaceTime? FaceTime with my mom while I'm showing you guys some stuff? Okay. That's not going to work. All right. Let's see. Maybe I can do this. Yeah, I guess so. I thought I had a camera here. There's no way just to like operate the camera from the iPhone or from the. Click on photo booth. Two words. Hey. Thanks, guys. Look at that. Look, we're all learning here. Okay. Okay, so I got something like this. Did you get something like that? Okay, cool. So what, like the things I'm noticing, I'm drawing the eyes real big. Maybe they're a little bit bigger than what was on the drawing. I'm trying to get the book, but I don't, I can't remember if there's like the book, what's inside the book is important. So I didn't even really leave that there. Kind of left the shape of the book. I left the frame of the window and then some shards of glass around, that kind of thing. That kind of is what I'm kind of like looking for. So like you can see that would be like a decent storyboard drawing of that idea. Because like you're getting the silhouette of Remy, you're getting his eyes, and you get that kind of like the silhouette of the book in the frame. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right. let's see the next one. Let's do this. All right. Give you a minute. What do you notice about the frame? It's wide? Yeah? Lots of space? Yeah? Yeah. Let's see. Drawing this chunk of cheese. Kind of doesn't look like cheese. And if I were drawing, maybe I would draw this. If I were drawing like a storyboard of this, I might draw a chunk of cheese that maybe looked more like a cartoony chunk of cheese, right? Just so you can kind of get like some of the reading on there, right? All right, how do we do? It's about a minute. I know it's fast, but that's the way it goes. So this is kind of what I got, right? So we're moving fast, all right? So you can see like, I have their eyes and I have their general kind of like push to the side, like they're kind of like leaning back a little bit. He's holding out this cheese over here. I kind of drew this first cheese, but I didn't really feel like it did the great job. Maybe I would draw like a piece of Swiss, or maybe just like a wedge of cheese, like a real actual wedge. So, you would kind of see that like, okay, everyone kind of realizes like what this is. Essentially what you're looking at is you're trying to do like a real quick shorthand so your boards kind of like read like easily. You know what I mean? Does anyone have any questions? See, there's like, I didn't put a lot of the grass or the detail in the back. There's something over here, but I don't really see that there's, there's too much going on, and I think they're trying to dull that back. So maybe a little bit of grass, but like not a lot. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So trying to push those things into the background, okay? How about this? All right, how we doing? Getting it in there? Maybe something like this, right? Do you get something like this? So I'm looking at a couple things. What's important, right? I put a little bit of value in here to kind of like knock that back a little bit, and I know he's looking through one of these holes of the colander, right? So maybe I just draw lines from that. It's just trying to make it as simple as possible. He's looking through this line. There's a lot of value and really cool shadow, but I don't know if all of that is like super necessary just yet. I know that's going to be there at some point, but is that really important? It could be like important. You could push it, but I think this is kind of like a quick kind of like board, and so I'm just kind of showing his silhouette really clearly, eyes super clear, right? A little bit of more like a harder value for the pupil, like a little thicker of line, just so you can kind of like tell it apart from the other stuff, and then you can kind of see through this colander hole, okay? Does that make sense? All right, let's keep going. All right, what's this from? Okay, cool. And here's the other thing is that a lot of people will draw in a lot of different ways. So I'm drawing up here on big pieces of paper mostly so I can kind of either hold them up or show them to you on the screen. Sometimes I'll just draw them digitally. Sometimes I'll just draw them in a little sketchbook, a little notepad, some Post-its, you know, if you want kind of an easy way to do it. I feel like we should put on workout music or like some techno. I want some EDM for make you guys draw really fast. Drum and bass, maybe? Yay! No, fuck, okay. Candy rave. All right, how do we do? Okay, this is what I got here. All right, simple, easy to draw, like but kind of like deceiving. I was first more worried about the rock for like the silhouette kind of thing, right? So I drew that rock silhouette in there, pretty rough. But then I went in and I kind of like drew a little bit more rocks. And I put a couple dots on it to show that there's like, it's like a stone material, some kind. I draw the eyes, of course, on our boy, and I put a little bit of grass in there, although that doesn't seem to be that important. And you can see like the value, look at the value of like the shadow, things like that. He could be like in the shadow of this thing. You could push that kind of like mood that he's in there. It didn't feel like it was like being pushed too hard for me, so I kind of feel like I just left that out. Wasn't as important. Maybe it's something that the lighting department can kind of do later. We could add it there. And then, of course, like a little bit of grass in there, just like little lines, but not a lot, because it's not like the main thing that we're looking at. I want to put a lot of focus on what we're looking at, which are his eyes, his silhouette, and the silhouettes of things, right? I also drew a little bit of a grid. Sometimes the grid's like very helpful. A lot of times, like it can be like what has been described as like, why is there a net in the sky? Some people have said this. You can kind of give it like a little bit of a subtlety, then it kind of like gives the idea of a grid. The best way to do it would be to use items in the, if I used grass in a way that would kind of like line up with those grids. But, it's not as important. You just don't want that grid to be so heavy that it feels like it's like weighing your drawing down. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's do a couple more. Let's see. What's something like this? Some more characters in there. Kind of start with these animation frames just simply because they're like the most easy way to kind of see what I'm talking about, because you can just translate this stuff super easily from like clearly, like look at all the eyes, look how clear they are. The lighters get so many crazy notes on this stuff, like you've got to make the eyes super clear. Like the eyes are in little shadows on these dragons. Why is that? Because we want those eyes to pop right out so we know exactly what we're looking at, what they're looking at, what their expression is. All that stuff is super important. Expressions are incredibly important, that they need to be clear, especially in animation. And I have no idea what's going on in that background, so I'm going to kind of leave that blank a little bit. And it's a little bit stressful. It's a little bit too complicated for me. So let's see. I'm going to put this in there. I'm just going to draw, make sure that I have, my little Arlo, his face is clear. Kind of get those characters in there, their smiles and their eyes and their silhouettes, right? Sometimes I won't even draw. You can get away with like not even drawing like insides of the arms or things like that of the dinosaurs, just to show you like what's important here. Like the silhouette is important. You're kind of like pointing to that. So, there's a lot of ways to do it, but like this is kind of one of the ways that I do like a shorthand where I just draw exactly the silhouette. Because it just kind of like cuts down on how many lines I have to draw or how many things I have to kind of like put in there. I could, start with the circle and build out from the middle and do the form. At a certain point, maybe I will, and maybe that would look better if I were doing like more finished boards. But again, if I'm trying to go as simple as possible, I'm trying to cut to the most important aspects of storyboarding. These are them. Like you want to cut to those really, really simple ideas so that you can move fast. And this will move fast, right? The tricky thing too is that we're looking at these frames and we're looking at it for a minute. That seems long. These things are on, the screen for like, splits of a second just to like get like the idea there. You need that instant read. It needs to go quickly. Okay? Cool. Let's do one more. I don't know. Let's do this. What's this from? Good Dinosaur. That's Buzz and Woody and other Woody. Oh, it's incredible. So, okay, that's Dash and that's Violet. This is interesting. These are some of those frames from the other films like Good Dinosaur. Those are 239. They're pretty wide. Sometimes you look at the frames and they're kind of more like this, like 185, right? This is roughly what your phone is sideways. This is kind of like the more general idea. But some movies want to be big and epic, and a lot of times they'll do that just by setting the frame up to be a 239. It makes like a bigger world, like Incredibles does it. Good Dinosaur, he's in this big world. He's trying to get through the wilderness to get back to his family. All that stuff like comes into play. Even though that did take place in Finding Dory, maybe it's not as important to them. Maybe they wanted to make it a more intimate story, things like that. I worked on many movies where we switched between. It's a very difficult decision to make at the beginning, and it sometimes will have to be edited. I've had to do things where something went from 239 to 185 to move all the characters in a little bit. I try to take advantage of much of that space as possible, but a lot of times you have to move those characters in if you're going to go into 185. And I don't think I have any cars in here, but if you think about cars, or you think about like drawing Dory, like she just basically is like a thin pancake with huge eyes, right? And so like that's what you're kind of drawing, and that's what they're looking at, right? Those eyes are super clear. Like if you squint, you kind of look at it. If you look at the values, like where are the values like most in contrast, right? And a lot of times just around the eyes. So can't emphasize that enough. Fin here. All right, how we do? Something like this? Yeah? Okay. So you're getting the idea, right? You get some eyes in there, you get some silhouettes. I wanted to make sure that they were clownfish because they got their stripes, but you kind of get this idea where like I don't want to cut the stripes all the way around them. I just like the silhouette is a little bit more important for the characters, right? So I build out the silhouette and then I kind of build into those the details that you would need. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, We got that? Oh, shoot. I'm multiple. What should I do? Space alien. There we go. Okay, cool. Excellent. Nose twirl. Oh, shoot. How could I get out of here?
It's in the middle.
Good God. Keep going?
Click the center. Center.
The middle square.
Up. Normal.
Perfect.
All right. I'm just playing. I know how to use this stuff. All right, so let's just talk about this real quick. We'll take a break for a second. All right, so, don't be shy, but take a gander at what other people are drawing in the room. It's always hard to compare to each other, like what other people are doing. But I just want to say this. No one draws the same way. Everyone draws a different way. I've almost never seen two story artists work in the exact same way at the beginning steps when they're thumbnailing or when they're doing early boards, right? So it's not like, it's okay. Everyone has a different style. That's, in my opinion, that's where your style is. People ask, it's like, oh, do I need a style? And it's like, well, you have an hour to draw 100 boards. That's your style. Whatever you're drawing, that's the way you do it. It's almost like your signature. So I think a lot of people worry about that aspect. However, I don't think it's something that you would necessarily need to worry about in storyboards because that will naturally just come out of you, how you like to draw, how you like to approach drawing. Do you draw a circle for the head and then build the silhouette from there? And do you have like a lot of hairy lines and things like that? It's totally fine. Like as long as like I try to make this eye silhouette and specificity work just so it will kind of like encompass your style, right? No matter what your style, those are the things that are important for your boards. And I don't want, everyone to draw the same. I know you guys don't want everyone to draw the same, and I don't think you should, compare yourself too much to like other people, but if you can kind of like aim yourself in that direction, getting that eye silhouettes and specificity in there, it'll help you out quite a bit. Who had problems with when you're drawing these things, it's too close, and you're like, shit, and then you have to draw up. Super common. Almost every time we're talking with interns, or even myself, working on Incredibles, things like that, I'll draw something and I'll just shrink it 50%, and I'll be like, all right. And but it's pretty common, right? So we tend to draw larger when we're drawing our boards, and a lot of times, a lot of stuff can be told with like, you can push things into the background. Value, we mess around a little bit with that with the Ratatouille, like looking through the hole. But you don't really necessarily need to, if you can make it read with your drawings, that's terrific. That you can totally get away with that. Sometimes the lighting is part of the story. And so you will kind of like want to focus on that. However, you want to keep it simple, right? So freezing up is like this whole thing where, a lot of things happen, but a lot of people work in a lot of different ways. I've seen, like I was saying, I've seen people draw on little Post-its. I've seen people draw on sketchbooks. I've seen people just draw digitally or on big boards. Some people don't even like to draw in frames. It's totally fine. Like the first steps of storyboarding is to really just get out of your own way and make yourself as comfortable as possible so you can get these ideas down quickly. Does that make sense? Okay. Too close, pulling out, very important. I wanted to show this board because this is like a trick that I've heard. Brad Bird talks about this, but a lot of other artists have talked about this too. Imagine yourself in a theater, right? Like you are right now. And you're looking at this, and you're looking at my giant head, and you can see that there's like heads in front of the screen. It's very clear, if you kind of like keep that in mind, that you're drawing for a movie theater, that things are much closer than you kind of think they are, right? Now you might think this motorcycle might be too far away for you to notice the detail, but if you look to the the one on the right, it's actually perfectly fine. Could be even probably further away. You could really pull back quite a bit, especially for storyboards, especially for like big things that are going to be on a theater screen. Value. I'll just go over this real quick, but if you look at the left side, you'll see like there's like 10 values. People use 9 scale values. You really want to like crunch those values down to just a few. Like especially if you're doing some digital stuff, you really want to keep it simple. You don't want to get it too crazy. Look at the bottom right panel. Look, I'm using white just to like knock out our main character against like that black background, just so we kind of like see what we're looking at. Maybe the character in the foreground is like pushed against like that white, just so we can kind of like see what's going on. I just want to be clear, and the values really just emphasize the silhouette a lot of the time. You don't want to get too crazy. You don't want to get too like realistic. You know, like if I wanted to make the boy like look invisible, maybe that top left panel would be a great example. But you know, as far as that goes, I don't think that's usually what we want to do. Okay. All right. So we're going to look at some panels. These are out of order, well, they're in order, but they're not sequential, right? But this is what I like to do. You find really good movies. You find movies that really speak to you, like with their filmmaking. Then you start like studying them, looking at them. This is what I'm talking about when you're doing like scene studies. This stuff's really important, and I think a lot of people sleep on this. And a lot of you really want to get in there and draw panels from your favorite movies or things that like really like push you. A lot of times, maybe it's not animation, maybe it is live action, right? Could be animation, like we were just drawing from, but a lot of times those have those eye silhouette specificity in spades, and some of these things can be a little bit more tricky if we do it for live action, but I think we should try, right? So let's see, what should we draw from? I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, it's amazing, and it has really great compositions. But I think, how about we do this one? Let's do that. So let's draw this in the storyboard panel like format. Eye silhouette, specificity, just like we've talked about. Remember, it's just really easy, and we're trying to think about those things in that way. Just try to make it as simple as possible and clear. All right. Just kind of move through this kind of quick, but let's see. How do we do? Something similar to this, right? So just drawing that silhouette of the thing in the foreground, drawing her, maybe drawing a little bit of her eye. Maybe she's angry, maybe she's a little sad. They're at a funeral, right? There's a little bit of napkin in this character's hand. Maybe I'd put a little bit more emphasis on that. I put the lines kind of through it just to kind of say like, oh, it's kind of there, but it's kind of like a shape and it's blurred in the foreground, right? We have this character and he's holding a book, and maybe like this other shadow shape, it might be another character, but not that important. There's some little graves back here in the kind of like the top of the frame, but I don't think that that's necessarily as important as kind of like what we're looking at. Maybe I would draw her arm in there, but I think ultimately I'm just kind of looking at that silhouette. Just trying to keep those ideas important. All right, let's do the next one. Let's go to another one. Let's see. Oh yeah, this movie's awesome. I don't know. I just like clicking through this stuff. The best thing about these things is that you get to click through some of these screen grabs if you get them. And you can kind of just take a look and see what characters are, what their like reaction is. This movie has a lot of really great depth in it. There's a lot of cool compositions, really neat. So let's try drawing this one. I think she won the Oscar for this little girl, yeah? And that's her father, right? So I think that's it's kind of an interesting movie. This was done in the 70s, but it's kind of playing out that I think it's in the 30s, and they wanted to make it look that way, so they used black and white. And the black and white just makes it look, like maybe like a little bit more vintage, but it's very clear and well done. The nice thing about live action too is like you don't have to cut a lot. Like if I were showing this in sequence, that would be best, because a lot of this stuff doesn't exist on its own. This like composition, although it's here, it's in the continuum of shots, right? So it only exists and it has power, whereas it like kind of fits into the rest of the film. So. But what's nice about this film is they'll do a setup like this. These characters will have dialogue, talk back and forth for a long time, and they don't have to cut away because you get everything like that you need to out of this. You see a man and a little girl like come. I don't know if they're trying to play as father and daughter just yet, but it's kind of like how they do things. And they come into this guy's shop, and he turns around, and we're real close to him. So we're seeing these people from like his point of view, essentially. We're looking over his shoulder, right? All right, how we do? Let's see. Something like this, right? So it's just basically, you're kind of getting the idea, right? You kind of like put these things together, you put these characters in their spaces, and then you can kind of like see how they kind of relate to each other. Could I draw her a weird hat? I think she's wearing like overalls and stuff. I guess I could, but I don't want to detract too much from her silhouette and his silhouette, Those kind of lines that I drew on there, sometimes I'll do that. A lot of times if I'm working digitally, I'll just like fill it in with value or maybe just leave it blank. But, with pen, it just feels good and it feels natural to kind of like knock those things out and push them into shadow a little bit. So you get those nice compositional shapes. I drew the door. Maybe I should have just drew the door frame and they're coming out of it. How important is that? What kind of shop is this? Hard to tell. I think it's like a gas station because I think they're at a gas station. But I think, they're at like kind of like a gas station. All right, let's do this. Let's pull back a little bit and draw this one. Some of these wide objective shots can get real tricky, but you can do a lot, you know what I mean? This can like be like very funny. This looks like a play almost. You could do this on a stage, right? There's kind of a point where the character ends up getting very far away from the camera. Now, eyes start kind of like receding away from it. It's hard to draw detailed eyes. The silhouettes become much, much more powerful, right? So maybe I'm kind of like more focused on her crossing her arms than I am drawing her individual eyes at this point, because we're just so far away. But that's why you'll see in animated films like a ton of close-ups. Most things are pretty close. They won't play things like this like Woody Allen would or something like that, where you would push things far, far away from us and not be able to kind of like, hear people have a conversation, but you're not really seeing what their faces are doing, It's just a different way of working. But I think for a lot of animated films, we're trying to put our emotions right up front and center, right? A lot of those Finding Dory, those Good Dinosaur things we were drawing from, you can see that we use a lot of close-ups, big eyes, and just to show like something happens, we have a reaction to it. What's our reaction? Is it bad? Is it good? That kind of thing. All right, how we do? Something like this? Yeah? Even looking at this drawing now, I'd probably just go in and I'd probably kind of maybe get rid of these. They look like people. They look like little silhouettes that I drew up there. Maybe I'd get rid of those things. Maybe I'd make them a little bit lighter or draw their silhouette not as connected. Maybe I'd draw their silhouette like a little bit more abstract. A lot of those times, like you can use silhouette to your advantage to draw it around the characters, but also you can show things are moved into the background by really not showing a lot of their silhouette, just like a kind of an idea of them. So the minute you kind of give them that silhouette, it gives them a little bit of form, right? So this is a scene where I think they're bargaining about this old car with the gas station attendant. She's crossing her arms over here on this other side of this pillar, kind of like getting annoyed at what's going on. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. Let's do then, let's see what else I got. Let's see. Let's see. Aliens? You like aliens? Let's see. Let's see. Let's do this. All right. You find the things that you like, okay? So, Fleabag had this hilarious scene. I don't have sound, but I'll just play the visuals just so we can kind of focus on that. But I don't know if you've ever seen this show. Her sister gets an odd haircut, which is great. And I think that there's like a lot of visual storytelling, but they don't have to say anything about the haircut just yet, you know what I mean? She's like, tell the truth, it's horrendous, that kind of thing. They go back and forth. It's a really great scene, but look at these frames. It's very clear like what's going on. And then they end up going to Anthony, the stylist. They end up kind of looking at, they show them the reference, they pull the reference out of the bin, and the reference is exactly the same haircut, of course, and so then they're just, no talking about it. They know what's going on, They just embarrass themselves. It's freaking great. And so I just laughed my ass off, and I loved it. Perfect comedy of or a combination of visual comedy that you can get in there. So a lot of times, maybe if you're writing a script, a script writer will, a writer will write a lot of dialogue. It'll be like, oh my gosh, what a bad haircut. It's like, I know. But if you can do it in visuals, a lot of times as story artists, you can just start lifting a lot of that dialogue out because you see it. And so you can kind of put subtext over it or some other kind of dialogue over some of the same scenes. So let's see. F. All right, so F. My haircut. Okay, so let's see. But this is what you kind of want to look at too. This is what I'm going to do. So we're going to draw a couple of these frames and just kind of start looking at them in continuity. All right. So let's draw this one real quick. this is what I usually do. So I'll draw like on panels, like on a page, and you want to draw them all together. Now, it's good to practice like some compositions that you like. You look at Paper Moon, you look at the movies that you like, and you're like, damn, that's a good composition. But remember, it's tricky because that doesn't exist in and of itself. It exists within the realm of the film. Other shots actually begin to influence those shots. And so a great way to do these things would be to find little scenes like this that you like, and you kind of like draw this stuff quickly, okay? All right, I'm gonna kind of move kind of fast in here, all right? I'm gonna go to the next one. Now draw that one. How do you draw a expression, thinking how to answer nicely, you know? This is a nice little composition thing. I'm sure that they were like, oh, thrilled with this if it was like a happy accident, but look how that tree branch is going right through her eyes. And you can kind of just, it gives you that compositional feel to kind of like see how that works. Reads you right to her expression, right? All right, so we go back to this, okay? It's almost the same drawing. She's like, tell the truth. What's going on with my drawing, with my hair? Oh. Okay. I don't know if you know Fleabag, she kind of does this thing where she kind of narrates and speaks to the camera sometimes. So she does this thing where she will look straight at the camera and speak to us as giving an answer. Okay. Okay, we got that one. All right, let's keep going. Let's see. This is interesting. We changed it up a little bit, yeah? See a little bit, this scene starts, no establishing shot, right? A big wide shot where you can kind of see that they're in the park and things like that. No, we start with that haircut. Hard cut, boom, what's like crazy haircut? And now everything's based on that, right? So a lot of attention to that. Tell the truth. Tell me right now, what's going on? This is very important at this moment, right? Okay, now this is, I think she says I look like a pencil. And so when you look at this, it kind of, it pulls out a little bit of the tension. The camera's like moving back a little bit. So maybe I'm studying that. It's like, okay, so if the person kind of like jokes around about their own hair, maybe I'll be okay with kind of like making the camera pull out a little bit. Give us a little bit of like, oh, breathing room. You know, sometimes you can be so close all the time. It's kind of nice to have a little bit of breathing room. You kind of want to go back and forth with your close-ups and your like wider shots. It's still close, right? And then her sister laughs at her a little bit. She's like, no, it's not that bad. She laughs. So maybe I'd do this. And she's kind of leaning in, and I think in the shot she kind of moves forward. They kind of have her moving forward so we can kind of cut on her action. She's coming to sit on the bench in the next shot. All right. Okay, here's the next one. Kind of sits down. She's like, I'm going to lose my job. It's very flat, right? So you kind of like start with this like confrontational thing, going back and forth on the over the shoulder shots. Now we're kind of like looking at this as being very kind of like flat. They're kind of like staged again, very equally on this bench. You know, pretty easy to see like what's going on. It takes the energy out of it. It's not as intense anymore. We laughed. And now, even though the sister's still having a hard time, we're a little bit more relieved of the tension because we pulled into this kind of like wide and flat shot. Background, I think they're probably just happy for something back there. We're gonna, how much of the focus is gonna be on that? Probably not very much. All right, so this is where she kind of starts telling her like this is going back and forth. she's like, it's cool. She's like, it's not cool. I think she said, it's French. And she's like, oh shit, really? So I think she kind of like thinks it's cool after the fact. Let's see. Yeah. So now we're back kind of like in these over-the-shoulder shots, back and forth, back and forth. So almost like you're throwing a ball back and forth, you know what I mean? You're kind of like playing these like things back and forth. The conflict is between her and her sister, right? And so sister's on the left, she's on the right. We're not breaking any of like the left-right rules, keeping that 180 rule simple. And then I think she's just like going back and forth. Maybe we'll just, let's see, back and forth. Yeah, this is where she tells her it's French. And now they're kind of like, but yeah, so now we're kind of like in this calm setup again. I think they shot this in a lot of different ways. I think this is one of the first things that they did shoot for this season. I think I was reading about this and it became kind of an issue. But in live action, you can shoot this a million different, these are both incredible actors. So you can shoot this a myriad of ways. I'm sure they shot it a whole bunch of different ways. Sure they like had a lot of different camera setups to get these shots like just right. And then later they can take all this and they can give it to an editor and the editor can like, will cut all this and be like, okay, they can make this work. But you can get a lot of like happy accidents in live action. You don't get anything for free in animation. So everything must be like planned out, right? That's why I think storyboarding is a little bit more important. Like they probably didn't necessarily need to storyboard this sequence when they're working on it, but they knew basically camera setups like here. There's nothing fancy either. The camera's pretty simple, right? Not getting too crazy. You know, it's not like an action film. It's not like Superman or any of the Batmans kind of thing where like big action scenes are happening. And so a lot of the camera work, you're kind of just looking at something that's really simple, right? Something like, this is what I'm kind of drawing here. So, just kind of looking, this is like maybe what my sketchbooks might look like. You just have like, kind of drawing back and forth, kind of seeing what they would do. When do we cut to this, the over the shoulders? That's interesting. A one off on her. We don't do the over the shoulder reverse here. And then we kind of go to this like wider shot. Okay, what line was that? You know what I mean? Like what line do they cut to that? All those things are really important to kind of figure out. And for me, like you're studying, like why did this make me laugh? Like how does this work? If I have a scene where some character has an embarrassing, haircut or something like that, I want to, I'm gonna be like, oh, have you seen that scene in Fleabag with the haircut thing? Yeah. All right, I'm gonna shoot it like that. You know what I mean? Or I'm gonna look at those things that make you laugh and you kind of like pull from those things. This is why it's like really good to have like a really, really deep knowledge of all this stuff. I mean, I can't even compete. Some of the folks that I work with are just like oh yeah, this is gonna be like the Superman, the 1970 Superman, and this happens, and okay, oh yeah, of course that has. I'm like, oh shit, I need to watch Superman again. But like they reference very specific films that have a big impact on them, but because you're all kind of like within the same realm of influence, you can kind of like understand those things. So a lot of times when we're working on films, we'll watch a bunch of movies together that are similar or kind of like have something that we're like sparked from. We want to shoot it like this. We want to look at it like this. A lot of those things end up like coming into play. Let's see. Yeah, it's a good scene. Yeah, you can see I could just like collect random shit that like I kind of just want to watch. You know what I mean? I kind of like it, and I like drawing from it, so I'm gonna kind of like do that. And it's it's like really it's like dealer's choice, like what people like. If you're talking about like beautiful compositions, you can't really beat "In the Mood for Love" by Wong Kar-wai. These are like really great. Like like a lot of these things, you just want to start storing these things and knowing knowledge about films and really getting to know how this stuff works. Because if things work for you, you can really pull from those. They can really give you that, give you a better eye for what you're working on, what you want to do. It's a strange job because although we work in animation, it's like a big group. Everyone has a subjective view on things, so it's a little harder to kind of get that it's harder to get your subjective view into the film. However, it's good to come from a place that you can kind of inspire other people to be like, look at this film, we're pulling from this. I've yanked many things from many cool things, like and there's stuff from Ghost in the Shell that I've definitely like boarded something. People are like, that was amazing. I'm like, yeah, it sure was. But like you put your spin on it. You know what I mean? It's not like maybe like a one for one, but like a lot of times you're going to have these things that you start building up in your mind, right? A good practice for this is there's like a big group of us, and everyone tries to watch 100 movies a year, which can work, and it can be like painful, hard to watch, but like sometimes you don't. And maybe you watch some of the older films that are not as long, but like you start building like a real great library in your mind of how all of this stuff works.